Harvard Yard was filled with laughter, camera flashes, and families celebrating their children's success. I stood there holding a plain white envelope while my twin sister, Aurora, screamed with joy over her gift, a 3-week, all-expenses-paid tour of Europe. My parents were glowing with pride, hugging her as if she'd just cured cancer. Then it was my turn. They handed me a generic card that looked like it had been picked up on the way to the ceremony. Inside was a $10 Starbucks gift card. My mother, Cynthia, smiled that flawless performative smile and said, "For all those late nights studying, Sienna. Gratitude makes life richer." Everyone laughed, and I forced a smile, but inside something cracked. It wasn't about the money. It was about what it meant. For years, I had been the dependable one, the quiet shadow who kept everything running while Aurora got the spotlight. What they didn't know was that for the last 18 months, I had been secretly paying the mortgage on the house they loved so much. Every month, I transferred thousands of dollars from my freelance coding income to keep their perfect life intact. I told myself it was temporary, that they'd appreciate it one day. They never asked, never cared where the money came from, and definitely never said thank you. Standing there in my graduation gown, holding that ridiculous gift card, I realized how invisible I had become in their perfect family story. I was the safety net they never noticed until it was gone. The Starbucks card felt like a symbol of every quiet sacrifice I'd made, wrapped in a bow and laughed off as a joke. As Aurora took selfies and my parents posed proudly behind her, I looked at them one last time and made a silent promise. They'd see me soon, not as the practical, quiet daughter they could ignore, but as the person who held their entire world together without them even realizing it. And when the truth came out, when they finally understood what my silence had been worth, it wouldn't be anger they'd feel. It would be regret. Growing up, Aurora and I were twins, but we couldn't have been more different. She was loud, charming, and creative. I was quiet, careful, and always the one fixing things that broke. When Mom's phone wouldn't connect to Wi-Fi, she called me. When Dad couldn't find an important paper, I was the one who stayed up sorting through piles to make it right. Aurora painted on the walls, and everyone clapped like it was a sign of brilliance. If I cleaned those same walls later, no one noticed. That was the rhythm of our house. She created mess, and I cleaned it, both literally and emotionally. As we got older, the pattern never changed. My parents, Cynthia and Robert, called Aurora their dreamer. She could skip class or quit a hobby and they'd say, "She's just finding herself." I, on the other hand, was their safety net. They expected me to keep things steady, to make up for whatever Aurora didn't do. It became my role, to fix, to fill in, to sacrifice quietly. The truth about the money started one rainy night during my sophomore year in college. I came home for the weekend and overheard my parents arguing. Dad said the mortgage payment had bounced, and they didn't have enough in their joint account. My mother's voice trembled with panic. I remember feeling my stomach twist. I couldn't stand the idea of them losing the house. Without thinking, I transferred some of the money I had saved from tutoring and a small coding gig. It was meant to be a one-time thing, a temporary patch until they got back on their feet. I didn't even tell them. I just wanted to help. The next month, I noticed another missed payment notice on the kitchen counter. The same fear hit me again. This time, I sent a larger amount, and it became the start of something I never planned, a quiet habit of responsibility. I picked up more freelance work, coding at night while pretending to study. I learned how to make good money writing software for small startups and later for a biotech firm that didn't care how old I was as long as I delivered results. I watched as Aurora posted pictures from concerts and weekend trips. I told myself I was fine with it. I had my own goals, and their smiles were enough of a reward. But deep down, I began to see how unbalanced everything was. They thought I was just good with computers. They never once asked how I managed to afford my own laptop, or how I always seemed to have money when they didn't. Each month, I wired the money like clockwork, covering the payments that kept our brownstone safe. There was no thank you, no acknowledgement, just another sigh of relief from my parents as if money had magically appeared. I became the invisible provider, and the lie grew with every quiet transfer. I told myself it was love, but really it was fear. Fear that without me they'd fall apart. By the time I realized how deep I was in, it wasn't about helping anymore. It was about control, theirs over me, and mine slipping away without a word. The restaurant was warm and filled with the sound of clinking glasses, laughter, and the smell of roasted garlic and wine. It was supposed to be a graduation dinner for both Aurora and me, but from the moment we sat down, it was clear who the night belonged to. Her name was written in gold icing on the cake. The decorations matched the colors of her university. Even the waiter congratulated her when my mother said we were celebrating our talented daughter's graduation. She didn't even glance in my direction. Aurora sparkled, talking nonstop about her upcoming trip to Europe. My parents hung on every word, asking about the museums she wanted to visit and the food she wanted to try. My dad ordered another round of drinks to toast her creativity and bright future. I smiled politely, nodding when spoken to, pretending the empty feeling in my chest didn't exist. When the attention briefly turned to me, my mother's tone changed. "Sienna's always been so steady," she said, as if it were both a compliment and a limit. "She'll be fine no matter where she ends up. Aurora, though, she needs the world to inspire her." Everyone nodded as if that made perfect sense. The whole evening felt like a performance I hadn't been invited to be part of. Every laugh, every compliment directed at Aurora was another reminder that I was invisible. I ate quietly while she opened her gift, a designer suitcase set and a leather journal for her creative journey. When my turn came, I received a small card with a few polite words about being proud of both daughters. My mom's eyes stayed fixed on Aurora as she spoke. I didn't even bother opening it until I was alone later. Inside was a check for $100 and a note that said, "Use this for something sensible." That night, back in my childhood room, I sat on the edge of the bed scrolling through my banking app. 18 months of payments stared back at me. Over $30,000 sent to the same mortgage account, quietly keeping the roof over their heads. I felt the weight of those numbers more than I'd ever felt before. Every dollar had come from nights of work, eyes burning in front of a computer screen, while they were asleep or laughing downstairs. The silence in the house felt heavy, pressing against me. For years, I thought keeping them safe would make them proud of me. But sitting there, I realized they didn't even see what I had done. To them, I was dependable, predictable, someone who didn't need praise or attention. My love had become invisible labor, taken for granted. That night, something changed. I wasn't angry, not yet. But the trust won once had cracked quietly inside me. It wasn't just about the dinner or the favoritism anymore. It was about how easy it was for them to celebrate Aurora's dreams while ignoring the fact that mine had been sacrificed to keep their world from falling apart.
The morning after the dinner, I woke up with a strange kind of peace. There was no anger, no tears, just a quiet understanding that something had to change. I made myself a cup of coffee, opened my laptop, and logged into my online banking. My fingers hovered over the automatic transfer tab for a moment before I clicked cancel. It felt simple, almost too simple for something that had controlled my life for so long. I stared at the confirmation message for a few seconds, then closed the screen. No dramatic music, no relief, just stillness. Days passed quietly. I went to work, came home, and waited. The world didn't fall apart. My parents didn't call. It was almost strange realizing how disconnected we truly were. They never noticed the steady flow of money that had kept them safe, and now they didn't notice its absence, at least not yet. It took nearly 2 weeks for the illusion to crack. On a Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. My dad's name flashed on the screen. His voice sounded tight, forced. "Sienna, the bank called," he said. "They said the mortgage payment bounced. Is something wrong with your account?" I could hear the edge of panic hiding beneath his calm tone. I took a breath. "No, Dad. There's no problem with my account. I just stopped the payments." There was silence. I could almost hear him blinking on the other end, trying to process what I had said. Then came the disbelief. "You've stopped them? Why would you do that?" His tone shifted quickly from confusion to irritation. Do you have any idea what you've done? We could lose the house. I leaned back in my chair, feeling strangely detached. I know, I said quietly. But it's not my house to save anymore. That's when the guilt trip began. The familiar words, "We're family, Sienna. Families help each other. You're being selfish," rolled out like a script he'd used before. But this time they didn't land the same way. I had spent a year and a half silently rescuing them, believing that love meant carrying their weight. Now I realized love wasn't supposed to feel like drowning. I have been helping, I said finally. For 18 months. You just never noticed. My voice was calm, but my heart raced. There was another pause before he muttered something about ungrateful children and hung up. That evening my mother texted me a single line. "We'll talk about this when you've calmed down." I looked at her message, half laughing at the irony. For once I was calm, calmer than I had been in years. I didn't reply. That night I slept without guilt. No alarms went off, no urgent transfers to make. The house I had helped protect wasn't my responsibility anymore. For the first time I wasn't carrying their mistakes. I didn't feel powerful exactly, but I felt free. Quietly, finally free. The morning I decided to leave, the house felt heavier than usual. My parents were at work and the silence gave me time to think clearly. I packed my belongings slowly, taking only what was mine. Clothes, my laptop, and a few books. Every corner of the house carried memories, but none of them felt warm anymore. By the time I closed the front door, I didn't feel guilt. I just felt done. No explanations, no goodbye note. I owed them nothing. I rented a small apartment across town. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without worrying about anyone else. I focused on work, kept my phone on silent, and avoided checking my messages. I knew the silence wouldn't last. It never did. A few days later, I received an alert from my bank. My father's name appeared under an attempted account access. He had tried to link my old account to his mortgage profile as a backup payment method. My heart sank, not from surprise but from the confirmation of what I had always suspected. It wasn't a mistake or confusion. It was entitlement. He genuinely believed my money belonged to him. I didn't confront him. Instead, I called the bank, reported the unauthorized attempt, and froze every joint connection between our accounts. The representative asked if I wanted to file a formal claim. I said yes. That was the moment everything shifted for me. It wasn't about emotions anymore. It was about setting boundaries they could no longer cross. That evening I started collecting proof. I went through old bank statements, saved emails, and messages about transfers I had made to help out. I noted the date of the first payment, the phone call when he blamed me for stopping, and the account activity that proved how they'd relied on me. I organized everything neatly into folders. It was my insurance, my quiet armor. Within days the calls began. Missed calls, then texts. My mother wrote long messages filled with dramatic pleas and guilt. "You're tearing the family apart," she said. "Your father is under so much stress. Please don't make this worse." I didn't respond. I had played that role long enough. Then came the shift in tone. The begging turned into threats. "We'll take legal action if you don't fix this," my father wrote. I knew it was just bluster, but seeing it in writing made me realize how far he would go to protect his pride. It was almost strange watching them unravel while I stayed calm. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. Every lie, every manipulation, every attempt to control me was now documented. For the first time I wasn't reacting, I was preparing. The person they used to silence and rely on had disappeared. What stood in her place was someone who understood the power of proof. And this time the truth was on my side. When my parents finally called and demanded to see me, I already knew what was coming. They didn't want a conversation. They wanted control. So I went. It was time for the truth to be spoken face to face. The moment I stepped into the brownstone, the tension in the air was thick. The house looked the same, clean, polished, perfect, but I noticed how fragile it all felt now. My mother was sitting on the couch, clutching a tissue, her eyes red. My father stood by the window, his hands in his pockets, pretending to be calm. Aurora leaned against the fireplace, scrolling through her phone as if she didn't want to be there. It was a scene I had played out in my head so many times, but this time I wasn't the one who felt small. Mom started first, her voice shaking. Sienna, how could you do this to us? You know how hard we've worked for this house. People will talk if we fall behind. Her words hit me like old echoes, the same kind that used to make me feel guilty. But this time they sounded empty. Dad's patience quickly ran out. He slammed his hand on the table. You will fix this. You have to take responsibility. We gave you everything and this is how you repay us. I stared at him, not angry, just tired. I'd spent years carrying a burden they never even saw, and now they wanted me to pick it up again. Before I could speak, Aurora rolled her eyes and muttered, "It's just money, Sienna. Why are you being so dramatic? You're tearing this family apart." Her tone was careless, almost mocking. I turned toward her, meeting her gaze. You think this is about money? It's about respect, I said quietly. She looked away, pretending not to care. My mother's tears turned into guilt-ridden sighs. You've always been so cold, Sienna. Aurora's emotional, you're practical. We raised you both the same. I let out a small laugh at that. No, you didn't, I said softly. You raised me to clean up after everyone. You raised her to believe someone always would. My father's voice rose again, loud enough to make the chandelier shake. Enough. You'll undo this. You'll transfer the money and this will be over. His words carried the same authority he'd used my whole life, but this time it didn't work. I looked him straight in the eye. When my money kept this roof over your heads, you didn't complain. You handed Aurora the world and gave me a gift card. Now you finally understand what that coffee cost. The room fell silent. My mother's sobs softened, Aurora's eyes widened, and my father stepped back as if I'd hit him. I turned toward the door, feeling strangely calm. For the first time, I didn't owe them anything. Not an explanation, not forgiveness. I walked out, leaving behind the house I had once saved and the people who never thought I could walk away. I was sitting at my small kitchen table, surrounded by boxes and papers, trying to get everything ready for my new apartment. It had been a busy week, filled with packing, phone calls, and lease agreements. I wanted a fresh start, something that was truly mine. My new landlord asked for proof of income and bank records to finalize the rental, so I opened my laptop and began attaching files to the email. I worked late, half-tired but determined to finish everything before morning. Somewhere between the clicks and tabs, I made a mistake that would change everything. I meant to attach my employment documents and pay stubs, but instead I clicked on the wrong folder, the one labeled mortgage payments. Inside was the spreadsheet I had been keeping for months, containing every single transaction I had made to pay for my parents' home. Without realizing it, I attached the entire file. Then, while copying my landlord's email, I accidentally clicked on the family group contact. Everyone, my aunts, uncles, cousins, received it. I didn't notice until an hour later when my phone started buzzing non-stop. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Then I saw the notifications, messages, missed calls, and voice notes flooding in. My aunt wrote, "Is this real, Sienna?" My uncle sent, "You paid for their house? For how long?" My cousin simply said, "Wow." I froze in my chair, my heart pounding as I realized what I had done. Within minutes, my private truth became public. The image my parents had worked so hard to protect, of being the successful, respected Morgans, was gone. Every family member now knew that it wasn't their savings or hard work keeping that house. It was me. I had exposed years of quiet sacrifice with one careless click. Then came the call I was dreading. My mother's name flashed on the screen. I answered, already knowing what was coming. Her voice was sharp, panicked. "Sienna, what did you do? Everyone is calling us. You've embarrassed us." My father took the phone next. You fix this right now. Do you have any idea how this makes us look? Their concern wasn't about the truth. It was about appearances. I stayed silent, letting them shout. When they finally paused, I said quietly, "You built your reputation on my money. I guess now everyone just knows it." Then I hung up. Messages from relatives kept pouring in. Some were shocked, some sympathetic. A few even apologized for believing the picture-perfect version of our family. I didn't respond to anyone. I sat in the stillness of my small apartment, staring at the glow of my laptop screen. It wasn't how I planned to reveal what I had done, but maybe it was the way it needed to happen. For years, they treated me like a background character in their story. Now everyone knew the truth without me saying a single word. The silence that followed wasn't guilt. It was relief. Everything started falling apart faster than anyone expected. Within days of that accidental email, our family group chat turned into chaos. Long messages flew back and forth, some defending my parents, others demanding explanations. People who once admired them now questioned every story they'd ever told. It was as if the curtain had finally been pulled back, revealing everything they had tried to hide for years. My mother tried to play the victim, saying she was misunderstood and that I had twisted things. But no one was buying it anymore. My father sent defensive messages, blaming me for ruining their lives. But relatives were now asking the real questions. Why their daughter had been paying their mortgage while they lived like royalty. I stayed silent through it all. I had said everything I needed to say, just not with words but with proof. The shame started to eat away at them. My parents stopped attending their weekend get-togethers and family dinners. Their friends in the neighborhood started avoiding them too. The people who once praised their success now whispered behind their backs. When my mother went to her favorite cafe, the barista she knew for years barely made eye contact. It was like watching their world quietly crumble one glance at a time. The final blow came from the bank. Because of the payment confusion and all the disputes, the bank reviewed their account. The loan officer called me to confirm details, and I simply stated the truth. I was no longer responsible for any payments. A week later, my father called in disbelief. "They rejected our refinance," he said, his voice barely steady. I could hear papers shuffling and my mother crying in the background. The security they thought they had was gone. A few days after that, the for sale sign appeared in front of the brownstone. The same house they once bragged about to anyone who'd listen was now just another property on the market. My mother couldn't bear to stay there during showings, so she stayed with a friend while my father packed boxes in silence. When the sale finally went through, they moved into a small rental apartment on the edge of town. A plain place with beige walls and a broken heater. I didn't go to see them. They didn't invite me either. From what I heard, they argued constantly. My mother blamed my father for relying on me. He blamed her for caring more about image than truth. Aurora stopped speaking to either of them for a while, embarrassed by the attention. The family that once prided itself on being perfect had completely fallen apart. I didn't feel happiness or triumph. There was no victory in watching them lose everything. What I felt was something colder: finality. They had built their lives on pride and pretense, and when those were gone, nothing was left to hold them together. For years, I had been the silent foundation beneath their kingdom. Now that I had stepped away, the entire structure had collapsed, just like it was always meant to. While my parents struggled to adjust to their new reality, I focused on rebuilding mine. I threw myself into my work, channeling every ounce of discipline and frustration into something meaningful. After years of freelancing, I finally registered my own company, Aegis Solutions, a small but ambitious tech consulting firm. I started with one desk, one laptop, and the kind of determination that didn't need applause. At first, it was just me taking late-night calls and fixing software issues for local startups. But word spread quickly. Clients appreciated my honesty and reliability, traits I had learned the hard way. Within months, I hired 2 part-time developers. By the end of the year, I had my own office space, modest but entirely mine. I designed every corner with purpose, from the glass desk to the small cactus by the window. It was simple, but it felt like freedom. My story caught attention when a journalist from a local business journal interviewed me for a feature about women in tech. The article, titled "Rising Star in Ethical Tech Design," described my journey from small freelance projects to building a company rooted in transparency and fairness. The word ethical stood out to me. I had learned it not from textbooks but from betrayal. Reading it in print felt like closing a circle. One Friday afternoon, as I was wrapping up a meeting, the receptionist buzzed me. "There's someone here asking for you," she said quietly. When I stepped into the lobby, I froze for a second. It was Aurora. She looked pale, thinner, and nothing like the confident sister I remembered. She wasn't wearing her usual designer clothes, just jeans and a wrinkled sweater. Her eyes were red, as if she hadn't slept in days. She didn't waste time. "Mom's on anxiety meds," she said flatly. "Dad barely gets out of bed. They've lost everything, Sienna. Are you happy now?" Her voice cracked halfway through the question, but her eyes were cold, almost accusing. I stayed silent for a moment, studying her face. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. "I'm not happy, they're in pain," I said slowly. "But I didn't cause it. They did. All I did was stop pretending." She looked at me as if searching for guilt, but there was none left to find. I gestured toward my office window, where my small team was laughing over coffee. "You see, Aurora," I continued quietly, "they're not suffering because I walked away. They're suffering because they treated me like a resource, not a person. When the bank they depended on closed, their comfort disappeared with it." She didn't respond. Her lips trembled as she turned to leave, pausing at the door. For a second, I saw the sister I used to protect, the one who drew messy portraits of us as kids. But that girl was long gone. After she left, I sat back at my desk, the hum of computers surrounding me. For the first time, I realized my peace didn't come from revenge. It came from freedom. I had built something lasting, something that didn't need validation from anyone. Their kingdom had fallen, but mine had just begun to rise. It had been several quiet months since everything fell apart. My business was doing well, and for the first time in my life, I felt balanced. One evening, I stopped by a grocery store after work to pick up a few things. As I turned down an aisle, I froze. My mother was there, standing by the canned goods, holding a basket that looked too heavy for her frail hands. She looked older, smaller somehow. Her perfect hair was streaked with gray, and her eyes no longer carried that sharp judgment I'd grown up fearing. When she saw me, she didn't look away. She gave a small, tired smile and walked toward me slowly. For a moment, I thought she might start another speech about family duty, but instead she spoke softly. "I was wrong," she said. Her voice trembled, but not from anger. "I thought I was teaching you humility, but I was really teaching you that you weren't enough. I see that now. I'm sorry, Sienna." For a long time I didn't say anything. Her words hung between us, heavy and fragile. Part of me wanted to cry, but another part, the part that had built herself from nothing, knew that this moment wasn't about healing her guilt. It was about acknowledging my own peace. "I accept your apology," I finally said, keeping my tone calm. "But things can't go back to how they were. I've made a life that feels right for me now." She nodded slowly, as if she understood that forgiveness didn't mean reunion. We stood there for a moment, two women bound by blood but separated by choices. Then I picked up my groceries and walked away, leaving her standing under the harsh supermarket lights. Later that night, back in my office, I opened a drawer and pulled out the small frame that held the $10 Starbucks card. Sat on my desk now, a symbol of everything that had changed. The day they handed it to me, I thought it was an insult. Now it felt like a marker of freedom the moment I stopped begging to be seen. Gratitude hadn't made me richer, despite what my mother once said. Walking away had. That simple truth became my quiet victory, and the one lesson my family never expected me to learn. Do you think I did the right thing by walking away from my family, or should I have tried to forgive them? Tell me what you think in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like mine.